Hey, what's going on, everybody? Jump Rope to Freedom. Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is a bit different. It's not about jump rope. It's about how I've been reading one book per day in 2022. I've been getting a lot of questions about how I read one book per day. I think people think that I'm just sitting down and reading for 4 to 8, 12 hours per day. I'm definitely not doing that. Reading a book per day these days with technology is definitely easier than it sounds. Tune in because I'm going to tell you exactly how I read one book per day. It's going to be actionable. If you follow these steps, you're going to be able to do it just like I'm doing it. So I got inspired to read one book per day a couple years ago, actually, when I was listening to a Jay Shetty podcast episode. I'm a big fan of Jay Shetty. I think he does a lot of great motivational, inspirational work. And then he started talking about reading one book per day. I don't remember how it happened, but it was on one of his podcast episodes. This was back in 2018, I think, when I was doing an hour commute each day from the Short Pump area down to Fort Lee, Virginia. It was an hour there and an hour back. So I started researching, and then at the end of December, I started reading one book per day just to see if I had the time to do it. The first strategy that I have in reading one book per day is to leverage as many platforms as possible. Audible is the main platform that I use. Without Audible, it would be impossible for me with a full-time job and a family and a YouTube channel to read one book per day. Audible is the platform that I'm leveraging the most. I'd say that up to this point, it's April 2022 now. Most of the books, probably 80 to 90% of the books that I have read this year, I've listened to on Audible. I also leverage the Kindle app on my Android phone, on my Google Pixel. I read on the Kindle app. The Kindle app has come a long way over the past few years. I actually prefer the Kindle app to my Kindle now because my Kindle I got back in 2013. It's real old. I might have to get a new one, but the Kindle app is a great way to read. It's simple, easy to use, and it syncs with your other devices. I also read a lot of hardcover books. I haven't completely transitioned to digital books. I like reading hardcover books. It takes me back to when I was a kid, when hardcover books were all there were. There was no internet. There was nothing like that when I was a kid. So when I was a kid, there were no cell phones where you could read on your phone. There were no tablets or anything along those lines. There's something nostalgic about reading a hardcover book. So I leverage multiple platforms for reading. I do hardcover books. I do the Kindle. I do the Kindle app and Audible. I mainly use Audible. I leverage those four so that I can mix it up and I can stay relevant. Another strategy I use, and I alluded to it previously in the video, is that I use Audible. Now, you don't have to use Audible. You can use another listening or streaming service where you can download audiobooks, but I use Audible. I think Audible is a fantastic platform. I'm not being paid to say this. I'm not sponsored by Audible. I'm able to get Audible for free because I have a feature on my American Express Platinum card. I have the $14.95 per month membership, which gives me one free book per month, but it also gives me access to the Plus catalog. And there are so many good free books in the Plus catalog. That's normally what I listen to, but I do take advantage of my 1 credit every month. Also, I get Audible for free essentially because I have the American Express Platinum card and I don't have to pay the fee because I'm in the military. So what that does is I end up having to pay the $14.95 at one point in the month, but then I get an automatic credit on my American Express account and then it zeroes it out. So I get a $14.95 credit after I'm charged $14.95. So it cancels everything out. So really, I'm getting Audible for free every month because I don't have to pay the American Express Platinum yearly fee. I think it's around $500 because I'm in the military. You want to use Audible or an equivalent audiobook service because you want to be able to listen to books and do other things at the same time. So I'm listening to books while I'm working out. I'm listening to books while I'm walking around my neighborhood. You can leverage doing more than one thing at once. You'll be able to retain the information if you are doing one physical thing and one cognitive thing. So if you're jumping rope or lifting weights or running and still listening to an audiobook, then you're going to retain that information. But what you shouldn't do is you shouldn't be on a meeting and listen to an audiobook, or be talking to someone and listen to an audiobook. That's two cognitive functions at once, and it's been proven through research that humans cannot multitask effectively. All you're doing is switching. You're not actually doing two things at once, you're just switching. So either if you're talking to your spouse or talking to someone at work and you're listening to an audiobook, or you're on a meeting and listening to an audiobook, you're not doing two things at once. You're just switching back and forth, and therefore you're not retaining the information from either one of those interactions that you should be retaining. But you want to leverage Audible or your streaming service and do one physical thing and one cognitive thing at once. So the cognitive function is listening to your audiobook, and the physical function is walking, exercising, cleaning your kitchen, whatever. So you want to leverage doing two things at once, one physical, one cognitive. That will alleviate the need to sit down and read all day, because that's definitely not what I'm doing. I'm not sitting down and reading all day. I don't have the time to do that. I have a full-time job and I have other responsibilities to where I wouldn't be able to just sit down and read all day. I'm leveraging audiobooks. Another strategy I use, and what you want to do, is you want to listen to the audiobooks at faster than 1 times speed. What you want to do is play with the speed a little bit. I listen on 1.3 times speed, and that's good for me. I'm still able to retain a lot of the information and get the overall morals and lessons of what the book is about. But if you have a comfortable speed of 1.1 times, or 1 times is your preferable speed, then listen at that. But go from 1x up to 1.5x and see at what point your information retention starts to degrade, and then dial it back a little bit. But listening to audiobooks at faster than 1 times speed is a way that you can listen to books faster while still retaining the information. Because at 1 times speed, most narrators of audiobooks are not going to be reading very fast, because they're told not to read fast. They're reading at a deliberate pace so that people can retain the information. If you kick it up a notch to 1.2, 1.25, 1.3x, it'll be more like a conversation with someone, and it'll be like someone talking to you and you listening to them. What I also do is I read short books. I go through the Plus catalog and I search for books that have 1 to 2 hours of listening time. And then once I couple that with listening to the books on 1.3x, that reduces the time down to around 45 minutes, an hour and a half, so that I have time to listen throughout the day when I'm walking around my neighborhood or doing an exercise. I've also sacrificed listening to music while I exercise, and I listen to an audiobook instead. I love listening to music. I've been listening to music while I exercise since I started exercising. But in order to get in my book per day, there's certain trade-offs that you have to make. So I started not listening to music and listening to my audiobooks during my exercise sessions. And that has helped tremendously, because normally I'll work out between 30 and 45 minutes. And if I have a short Audible book on deck, then I can finish my book early in the morning and then listen to one of my longer books, or read one of my longer books later in the afternoon when I have some time. What I also do is I have several books in rotation. I'm not reading a book per day that's as long as War and Peace or Once an Eagle. Those books would take 35, 40 hours straight to read. I do have long books in my rotation. I do have short books in my rotation. What I do every day is I look at where I'm at. Say I'm reading The Last Juror right now by John Grisham, and I see that I'm about halfway through. Well, then that means that I need to look at the other books that I'm reading and make an assessment of where I am to plan which book I'm going to finish in the next day. If I was at the end of this book, then what I would do is I would save my short books that I have in my Audible library. I would say, okay, I'm going to finish this book tomorrow, so I don't need to finish a short book on Audible tomorrow because I'm almost done if I was around here in the book. So I'm reading anywhere between 7 and 8 books at a time. I'm still able to retain the knowledge. I'm still able to understand what the book was about. I'm still able to apply the principles that I learned in each book in my life and make my life better. So it's possible to read 7, 8, 9, 10 books at a time. I don't read every single one every day. They are always stacked up, and I'm always making an assessment to see which book I'm going to finish next, and that in turn allows me to understand if I need to listen to a short book of like 30 minutes to an hour, or if, say, I was right here in this book, toward the end of this book, I'd say, okay, I'm on page 500 in the last juror, so that means that I'll finish this tomorrow so I can preserve the short books that I have in my Audible library for later on. So it's all about making an assessment of where you are and being intentional with your schedule. If you want to accomplish anything in life, you got to be intentional about it. That's something that I'm continuing to learn. You got to sit down, take the time to game out your strategy and understand what your strategy is going to be if you want to accomplish anything. I start my day and I end my day with reading. In the morning, I'm reading right after I do my lumen metabolism check, after I brush my teeth. I journal, I write down things that I'm thankful for, affirmations, I ask myself a question, and then I write down my quote for the day, and then I read for about 30 minutes to an hour. And that helps me. That helps me early in the morning before the obligations start coming in, before the emails and the work calls start coming in. I'm reading. So I'm getting 30 minutes to an hour of reading done, and that's normally done on the Kindle app or a hardcover book. And then I go into my workout, and then I'm reading for another 30 minutes to 45 minutes through the Audible app. I also end my day with reading. I don't get much reading done during the day because I have a full-time job in the military. I power down all my devices at 8 p.m. and then after that I sit in my office and I'm not looking at any screens and I read my hardcover book. John Grisham is a great author, one of my favorite authors. His books are page turners and they're fun to read. But this is something that I got from Tim Ferriss. I'm a big Tim Ferriss fan. He reads fiction at night, and I think that there's a lot of value you can get from reading fiction books. I went through a long stretch where I wasn't reading any fiction whatsoever, but that was a mistake because you can still learn from fictional characters. I've learned a lot of great things from John Grisham's books, especially The Rainmaker. That's probably my favorite John Grisham book. But reading fiction anytime gives me an appreciation for the imagination that people have. People like John Grisham, J.R.R. Tolkien. What an imagination to be able to make up a fictional land, a fictional world, even a story, and to make it up in such an interesting way where people will read and be engrossed and engaged in your books. It's amazing, and it gives me a lot of respect for these writers who have such a vivid imagination and their ability to put their imagination down in a coherent way to where people are reading it. That was a little digression about why I think fiction is important, and it also sparks the creative mind. So I read fiction before bed. Normally after 30 minutes, 45 minutes to an hour of reading before bed, I'm tired and I fall right asleep right around 2100. To retain knowledge, I take a lot of notes, especially in the Kindle app and on my Kindle. There's a way that you can highlight and take notes. That's a great way to retain, especially if you're reading a complicated, complex book. At the time of this recording, I'm reading On the Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. And Charles Darwin, probably one of the smartest people to ever live, and his writing can be difficult to understand. It's taken me a while to get through the book. I'm reading it on my Kindle app now, and it's It's made it a lot easier. But in order to understand all the concepts and the principles that he puts forward in his book, and to understand the prose that he's writing in, I take a lot of notes, I highlight a lot, and I ask questions. I say something to the effect of, wow, what an interesting thought process or interesting comment, just to stay engaged in it, because what that'll do is that'll spark your memory and make you think back to that. And also you can always go back and read the notes. Taking that a step further is that to retain knowledge, I always write a review on Goodreads. Goodreads is owned by Amazon. If you have an Amazon account and you have a Kindle especially, but even if you don't have a Kindle, you have an Amazon account, you can link it to your Goodreads and it'll help track how many books you're reading. So I always write a review on Goodreads whenever I'm done with a book, because it's cool to go back and read the reviews and read what I was thinking at that point in time. But also, if it's fresh in your mind, the book you finish is fresh in your mind, you write down the different concepts, the different ideas that the author had that resonated with you. It'll help you to remember those key concepts so that you can apply them to your life if you want to. All right, the reason I did this video is because a lot of people are asking me how I'm reading a book per day. It is truly not that difficult. I'm of average intelligence at best, so if I can do it, I'm sure you can do it. What it takes is leveraging different platforms, leveraging technology, doing one physical and one cognitive thing at once, and intentionally assessing where you are in your books, how you're spending your time, and making trade-offs if you need to. I think the biggest trade-off that I've made is not listening to music while I do my exercise session, but listening to audiobooks instead. When I'm on the treadmill, I'm listening to an audiobook now. When I'm jumping rope, I'm listening to an audiobook. When I'm lifting kettlebell, I'm listening to an audiobook. That's probably been the biggest sacrifice for me. And that's not a huge sacrifice. I can still listen to music in the background when I'm working. I can still listen to music during an evening walk. I can listen to music in the car. If you want to read a book per day or even a book per week, or you just want to read more, there are plenty of ways to do it. I outlined how I'm reading a book per day in this video. So I encourage you, if you want to read more, to take some of the ideas that I have, some things that are working for me, or take all the things that are working for me, steal the plan, apply it to your life, and see how it works out for you. But the number one piece of advice that I'd give if you want to read more is to carve out time in your day, be intentional about your time, question how much time you're spending watching Netflix or YouTube videos, and see if you can reallocate that time to more reading, whether that's 15 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day. Maybe you need to get up earlier and start reading, maybe go to bed later, shift your schedule around. There's a lot of things you can do to find time to read. Please be sure to subscribe. If you like the content and you want more content like this, hit the notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, jump rope to freedom. Peace, take care, and thank you for your support.